I'm finally now getting both of your tweets as they come in, which I didn't before.
You couldn't set it up?
I didn't set it up. And so now that I am, I feel like what we have here, I also have when I'm at home. It's so good.
Follow Jenna on Twitter, @JennaWolf, @ChrisCarter80, @GetNickWright.
Okay, then you guys get to know what I'm doing at home, what's better? Let's start with some football.
Night-night.
Before 6 p.m. The Dallas Cowboys are totally back. All right, not quite, but they did get a win last night over Washington, 38-14. Dak Prescott coming off a terrible 3-game stretch. He threw for just over 100 yards. He did have 2 touchdowns. Alfred Morris, former Redskin, ran for 127 yards and a score. So the Cowboys improved to 6-6, keeping their playoff hopes alive, but barely. Here's Dak after the game talking about the importance of getting the win.
It's huge. It's huge. It's exactly what we needed. I mean, that was Cowboy football. That was to our expectations and our standards. But we can't sit here in this one victory. We've got to move forward, and we've got to grow off of this one and get better.
All right, CC, let's talk about this. Do you think the Cowboys, did they convince you that they pretty much can stay in this hunt until Ezekiel Elliott returns to the team?
I wouldn't say off of last night's game I'm convinced they can stay in the hunt, but what I can say is that there is a path to victory, that the Cowboys, a pattern that they follow, that if they want to win, that they're going to win more football games, regardless of who the players are, because of a style. And that style is based on the high draft picks that they've put on that offensive line. Those are the number one resource, especially when Zeke is not playing. That's the number one resource. If you look at as a unit, that's the most powerful unit on the Dallas Cowboys. They have to put the football game in those 5 or 6 guys' hands. And last night, that's what they were able to do. And when you're able to do that, you can protect your quarterback. Your quarterback can be a game manager. I think that I think my number was 32 to 35 carries. And if Dallas's defense creates 2 or 3 turnovers, or if you throw in some type of special teams play, that's the way Dallas could win. That's the way they won last year. But it was Zeke in the offensive line. Offense containing the ball for over 32 minutes, keeps that undersized defense off the field, and the defense making enough plays to give them extra possession. So was I convinced? No, this was the recipe that I thought that they could win a lot of football games. And what I said yesterday was, this is not the biggest game for Dak Prescott. This is the biggest game for this organization, for the coaching staff, the offensive line, the wide receivers to make a couple plays. And all those things happen. And Dak still was able to get the victory because it is such a team sport. And the way this team is built, they can't go forward and be good without that offensive line being dominant.
So last Friday, a week ago today after Thanksgiving, I said the Dallas Cowboys were finished. Said that's the F word that applies to them. Finished. They didn't get a pardon from the governor last night, but they may have gotten a brief stay of execution. We've said all along they need 10 wins to make the playoffs. If they only have 6 losses, 10 wins is still technically available to them. The teams they're chasing for the wild card, the Falcons and the Seahawks, both have very difficult games this weekend. The Falcons playing the Vikings, the Seahawks hosting the Philadelphia Eagles. So we could wake up Monday morning and the Cowboys are 6-6, and the teams ahead of them are just 7-5. They actually get to play the Seahawks later in the year when Zeke is back, and you can start doing the math as to how, with a quarter of the season left, the Cowboys are still alive. But if that is going to extend past today and into next week and the week after, then the quarterback, Dak Prescott, has to be better than he was last night. If you didn't stay up and watch the game, you're up early this morning, you went to bed early, and it's, they won 38-14. Offense back on track.
Be careful.
No, it wasn't. Dak's career low in passing yards was last night, aside from throughout the Philadelphia game last year where he played 1 series of games that he's actually played. His second lowest yards per attempt were last night. Dak threw the ball 22 times for 102 yards. That is wildly inefficient quarterbacking. And he was missing guys high again. He was missing guys low again. And you say, he hurt his hand. Before he hurt his hand, with 3 minutes left in the first half, Dak had 28 yards passing. Okay? So there is real concern about what Dak looks like without Zeke, and that continued last night. The story of the game to me was, in NFL history, you win the turnover battle by 4, you win 95% of the time.
Yes.
You add to that a special teams touchdown, and you win nearly 100% of the time. The game was almost unlosable for Dallas based on those two numbers alone, and I give Dak credit for not turning the ball over, but this wasn't a story of Dak Prescott's, return to grace. This was a story about everything else on the team.
So that's what I wanted to pivot off of, the fact that when the game first started, Dallas comes out 4 straight 3-and-outs. You're like, oh, this is Dallas again. But despite Dak playing extremely mediocre, if not playing a terrible game. He did have 2 touchdowns, but a terrible game. I think it was the first game in the last couple of weeks that we've seen a couple of the other pieces show up. Like Alfred Morris had a great game. Des Bryant actually felt good about himself, caught a couple touchdowns. The offensive line played okay. The defense played okay. And if you could even say Jason Garrett actually coached the game, and we've been questioning whether he could make some adjustments or coach. Not a great game, but they did the things they need to do. They still put up 38 points. So my question, C, is, do they need Dak to be the Dak that he was last year? I know they're not going to play the Redskins every week, but if they can have multiple components working on the same page to forge ahead and perhaps get to 10 wins.
Well, they have to make explosive plays. All right? You're not going to be able to run the ball the way they ran the ball last night because they didn't get a lot of big plays out of the running game. They're very fortunate they played the Redskins. They're very fortunate that the Redskins, they tried to give them the game at the beginning of the game. And Nick said the percentages as far as win the NFL game when you lose the turnover margin by 3 or 4 and you have some type of special teams, Jason Garrett, am I going to give him any credit? Give him credit for what? They were fumbling the ball. That's not coaching. The punt return. The punt return was the biggest play of the game. That's not coaching. That was one guy making a play with their special teams.
And if it is coaching, it's special teams coaching. Not, you know what I mean? If you want to give any coach credit, it would be the special teams coordinator, not the head coach on that play.
Yeah,
right?
Typically, now, in a return like that was one guy, I'm better than you.
Okay, fair enough.
Like that, it wasn't set up. It wasn't some great scheme. It wasn't like they decoyed them, kicked the ball over here. They got everyone baited over. So this is just one guy making a play. And a lot of the game is about guys making play. Dez made a play for him when they were really struggling. But defensively, they have to be able to play less than 30 minutes. And to me, that was the important thing. And Washington, you're talking about banged up. Their third offensive centers. Trent Williams, the left tackle, went out. A backup at right tackle. No wide receivers. They don't have a wide receiver that would be a 1, 2, or a 3 on NFL rosters. They're bad off. They got Vernon Davis at tight end. It's probably their best receiving threat on a regular basis. Their number 1 rusher is out for the season, Cris Thompson. So Dallas was very fortunate that they were playing Washington last night.
Now, to be fair, Dallas is going to be fortunate next week when they play either Davis Webb or Geno Smith, right? Like the fortune could continue, and then they have a game in Oakland, and then Zeke is back, and we see the difference he makes with this team. So, listen, a win is so important in the NFL. They got it. They were
especially when you have 6 losses.
Right. They were underdogs at home. So I don't want to miss the importance of that or gloss over the importance of that. But, Cece, you mentioned explosive plays. Cowboys had 1 play last night longer than 15 yards.
Yes.
They had 0 plays longer than 25 yards. Jenna, you mentioned Des Bryant. And listen, 5 catches, 61 yards, and a touchdown. And the touchdown he caught was vintage Des in regards to, I'm just going to be better than you. Man-to-man coverage, throw it up. I'm going to go, to quote CC, apprehend the football. And that's exactly what he did. What's a bummer is that play stands out because it's been such a rarity this year for the highest paid player on the football team. So, listen, what I wanted to see last night was a very good Dak Prescott game. That didn't happen. And it would appear now that we have a quarter of a season worth of evidence, that doesn't appear to exist with this current version of Dak unless Ezekiel Elliott is standing behind him. That's concerning. But they get to 8-6 against the Giants, and as I mentioned, the Falcons lose the Vikings, the Seahawks lose to the Eagles. Like, the Cowboys, they still have a pulse,
right,
which is what they hoped they would have coming out of last night.
So Dallas beats Washington for the second time this season. All they have to do is play Washington every single game.